Welcome to Swiss Holistic Institute, inviting you to this video podcast series on spiritual elderhood with Bob Weathers and Thomas Rüedi. Today's issue is Indigenous Wisdom on Global Flourishing. Good evening, everybody. So this is another session with my dear friend over the pond, what we say, over the big pond, over the ocean with my dear friend Bob Weathers in California, United States. And myself, I'm Thomas Rüedi in the Eastern Switzerland region. So we have our meetings and recordings of our talks, like spontaneous talks, for quite a while already.
Yeah.
And we have selected another issue for today. And last time in the discussion we have been doing, there was the issue coming up for like global flourishing index or something.
Yes. Yeah.
And this reminded me to have read about this in quite a different context. And I was remembered to have read about this in a book called Indigenous Sustainable Wisdom, which is looking like this. The cover, which is a book from Professor Darcia Narvaetz and some colleagues, professors, and which they published in 2019. And to start with, as we did last time, I have selected some text which I'm going to introduce to you now, which we take to start into the issue. So the text is the first chapter of the book is called People and Planet in Need of Sustainable Wisdom. And this is, yes, this is all about, or this is quite a part of what elderhood is supposed to be, to look after sustainable wisdom, And I think important is in the other book we have been talking about. I have lots of books here to show. Is From Aging to Saging, from Zalman Shachter-Shalomi and Ronald Miller. Is what we find out when you read this book, or what I did is I found they selected one of the major issues about to reflect and to learn about elderhood is to study and practice indigenous wisdom traditions. And that's why we bring it in here, because we believe that this is an important issue to understand what elderhood is all about,
Yes.
So when I read this text now, it's a text written about from the perspective of indigenous people of today. And this is the text.
Yes, please.
Non-industrialized First Nation indigenous societies around the world support the ancient worldview, an indigenous worldview that can provide a portal to global flourishing.
Yes.
An emphasis on global flourishing in contrast to economic globalization. economic globalization provides an alternative to the fatalistic pathway of the dominant worldview. This worldview is accompanied by a sense of place on the earth, by a feeling of being at home, and by practices of fitting in with the local landscape and bio-community. Many First Nations peoples of the earth have lived well and kindly with the earth for generations. Many belong to cultures around the world that lived sustainably and relatively peacefully for tens of thousands of years. Their companionship orientation, from raising children to living with humans and non-humans, fosters enduring wisdom, morality, and flourishing. These societies are continuous with 99% of the history of the genus Homo and provide evidence for humanity's sustainable relationship with the rest of nature. Now, the last one. Thus, we may regard the indigenous worldview and lifestyle as a baseline for humanity living well on the earth and as an alternative pathway for human futures. This is the text I wanted to introduce to start, and maybe, yes, I will hand over the mic now to you, Bob, to get your impressions on the book and on this text. And so let's dive into
Thank you.
the
Thank you.
exchange.
I loved you reading it because, I've read it silently, but to have you read it out loud, it's so rich. I really appreciate that. Thank you for that. I want to tell you something that came up spontaneously for me as you were reading. I couldn't possibly have planned for this. Some 40 years ago, I inquired with a friend here. I live in Los Angeles, or lived in Los Angeles. I said, could you find a Jungian analyst, that is a psychologist or analyst in the tradition of Carl Jung, your fellow countryman, and could you please find I said, could you please find the Jungian analyst that is the most out there? That was I didn't want to find somebody who was inside the box. I had no idea what he would come up with. My friend and I were both kind of on the fringes of psychology. We were both still in graduate school. So he referred to me, Donald Sloggy, and I've worked with Don Sloggy for 40 years now.
Wow.
40 years. He's been a mentor of mine. And what struck me is how fortunate I am is that Don's first love is for the Native American traditions. He was immersed in the tradition of black elk, for example. When he was a young man, he got on a motorcycle and rode out to meet John Neihardt, who was the translator of the Black Elk Speaks book. And Neihardt was he knew black elk. So Don stands in that tradition as much as he stands in the tradition of Jung. Don's analyst was Ed Edinger, who was a influential Jungian here in the United States. Ed Edinger had worked directly with Jung. So there's the tradition of Jung and the tradition of black elk. And I met with this person, and I have to tell you, from the very first meeting, Don didn't strike me as out there. He struck me as in there. It was the sweet spot for me. And I'm just finishing a book dedicated to 40 years of working with him. And it really is acknowledgement of what you just read, is that how fortunate I am to have worked with somebody closely for 4 decades now, my entire adulthood, who embraces the values that you just read that are articulated so beautifully in this book, which is new to me, and yet have been embodied in virtually every conversation with Don for all these years. So I just wanted to respond. That just welled up as I was listening, is that Don is no more wedded to conventional Western psychology or Western culture than I have been for all these years. But I can't separate out my own growth and development from my relationship to this man who we speak much more about Native traditions in our therapy together, or our counseling, or our mentoring. At this point, it's transformed over the years than we do anything else. That's Don's primary language. And so I'm looking forward to wherever this book goes. I'm just going to be reading it chapter by chapter. But I'm also really looking forward to hearing from you because you're steeped in this and value it. It's very much a part of your previous book, which is incredible. I've got it right here on my bookshelf. And I know it's going to, well, I can pull it off.
Yeah.
Okay, you got it. You got it. Yeah. Yeah, thank you. As well as the next book to come on spiritual elderhood. So I just want to share that as an initial response. I'm just really appreciating where we're headed right now with all of this. It will be very meaningful to me to incorporate and to integrate this personal relationship of mine with Don Sloggy, with my personal relationship with Thomas Rüedi. Yeah.
Right. Thank you, Bob. I think it's quite amazing to hear that you had this incredible gift to work with a
Yeah,
person
yeah,
that
yeah.
is so deeply, how you say, infused
That's perfect. He's definitely is infused.
with
Yes,
with
yes,
with this
yeah, yeah,
with this indigenous wisdom. And what I personally really like is about Darcia Narvaetz and her work is that she's bringing it up, from, you know, on one hand, I think uh, something quite difficult is to get to the culture that is original indigenous, wherever in the world this is,
yes,
because most of these cultures have been heavily uh, destructed or damaged about with colonialism, and so what is very special, this is something I brought into my latest book now, is I was looking for information, for indigenous information that, to me, from where the sources are, I believe they are original, they are decolonized. So I think, because otherwise it's almost ridiculous to talk about indigenous culture from a originally Western view, because such a different culture, and it needs these persons like Professor Narvaez, which is herself partially indigenous, and most of, I think, all of the the co-authors she has in her book are at least partially indigenous. So what they do is they try to bring together original indigenous culture with modern scientific view to somehow to to bring the best parts of both together. So I think that's really special for me. And
yes,
of course,
yes.
I was looking for very traditional materials too, but I think this book is for me, this is for me really a treasure for talking about elderhood, but talking about cultures. They have really elderhood as a strong pillar introduced in the culture. Yes.
You know what comes up for me right now, listening to you describe your own acquaintanceship and love for this material? I don't think I've made this connection till right now, Tomas. Before I met Dawn, which was in January of 1987, it's very memorable to me. I had been in graduate school in a 6-year doctoral program, of all things in clinical psychology. But I had the good fortune of going to a graduate school that we had electives. And every time I took an elective, I took it outside of psychology in cultural anthropology. And there were two faculty at the graduate school, Dr. Chuck Kraft, who had spent years in West Africa, and Dr. Paul Hebert, who had done the same thing in India. And how we say it in English, I don't know, you probably have a term for this in German, is that they both went native. So they both went to these countries as Christian missionaries, but in the process were so deeply affected by the place they went that they went native. And so they came back much more influenced by Nigeria and Africa, or at least as much influence as the reverse. I was so deeply touched by their stories. I took every elective class that I possibly could from these two professors. I almost did my doctoral dissertation in cultural anthropology, but I wouldn't have been granted a doctorate in clinical psychology. But one thing I learned from both of them is that well, first of all, I was introduced to different ways of understanding things. And what came clear, and it's really gotten clear for me over the years, is though I was trained formally in clinical psychology, which in the US is just completely westernized psychological science. I mean, it was just, that's what I was studying. But I was so influenced by these courses that I took by these two professors that I remember one of them, Chuck Kraft, who was I was probably the closest to him. He said, he says, you're much more of a shaman than a psychologist. He said, what he was saying is I was much more drawn to indigenous practices, always was. And here thank goodness for them, because if there hadn't been those two professors with their various courses, I don't think I would have been exposed to this, and I would have really been like a square peg in a round hole. But I felt at home with them. It's no accident that I chose for my doctoral dissertation studies of the Far East in terms of native practices, particularly within Buddhism and Hinduism, around meditation. Now, it was a version of that because there I was going to a Christian seminary, and my doctoral dissertation is on Buddhist meditation. But there was just always a draw to these centuries or millennia old traditions every place else but the United States, except the Native American traditions that I got tapped into with Don Sloggy, who I mentioned earlier. So just by a set of circumstances, there was like something inside of me that wanted a bigger, deeper container than what I felt like Western psychology provided. And thank goodness it was given me.
Yeah. I mean, you must be, as I can hear, you must be lucky to have these very special influences on your work, and
Yeah.
I guess that's why one of these reasons, or one of these many reasons, you are now on this path, on this very special elderhood path.
Thank you. Thank you.
We
Yeah.
both go on our in our personal way, So on the other hand, I think what I was researching in these last years with the last book and this book is there are hardly no really indigenous tribes all over the world, in Africa, in North, Central, and South America, and in uh, like in Scandinavian countries, and they all have the same destiny, They all having been suppressed in their culture. Their children have had to, they were forced to learn a different language, and they have been sentenced heavily when they talk their mother language, and all these kinds of stories. So they fit for all these people. And what is so striking to me is when I read this book now, what we are talking about today, it is saying, and of course this will be, popping up in my new book too, is
Mm.
saying these cultures we have so heavily depressed, suppressed them. These ones could help us to survive as humanity, because they have the wisdom. They're not only not primitive, but they are the ones they save the wisdom, This is one of my strongest motivations, saying we have to definitely bring this wisdom back, and to bring to this wisdom to the Western society, to to understand. Talking about wisdom, it's a big issue in my last book, but it is of course it's an issue in elderhood work anyway. So it's these indigenous people where they can live in their traditional way. They are far in front of us
Yes, they are.
because they're
Yes, they are.
still implementing their wisdom, and of course they have these problems too, because the Western lifestyle is, as we have been talking last time about Anthropocene too,
Yes.
is a very strong issue to like that opposite view.
Yeah. 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 I just want to say amen to all you're saying. I feel like it's an incredible contribution that you're making in both your last book and the more recent one yet to be published. It's at the very heart of our conversations here in terms of, it's almost like inviting the native traditions or the indigenous ways, to invite those to be our elders, to
Yeah.
allow those to inform us in our own eldership. And we've lost, it's not surprising, is it, that we've lost a sense of elderhood in most of the modern world. We don't have any concept. Older people are to be discarded, whereas in the ancient traditions or the native traditions, even nowadays, in all the various cultures you mentioned, the elders are venerated, they're valued.
Yes, I mean that's the really big surprise and big fortune we have to there is this book from aging to saging. This is a treasure, bringing up the like traditional elderhood issue or view, and bring it together with modern scientists' views, like neuroscience, and then with the ecological movement. And this is what Salman Shachter-Shalomi and this Ronald Miller, this is what they did. What I'm trying to do is now to bring this into the actual situation we live as Westerners today, because I believe that's also in my book. I believe that the situation they met like 15 to 20 years ago, the situation has worsened
Yes, yes, yes.
incredibly in the meantime, and the importance of what they have been talking about is now 100 times,
Yeah,
than
yeah,
in
yeah,
these times. So
yeah,
that's why I'm so fascinated to take their view and to bring it into today's view of a holistic view, as
yeah.
we say also in Western cultures, that is really opening up the view to these very important issues again. Yeah.
You know what comes up for me in terms of things worsening? I was born in 1955. I just celebrated my 70th birthday 2 weeks ago, and was raised in the 1960s by two brothers that both went to UC Berkeley in the late 60s at a time of tremendous, um, I want to say, progress around civil rights in every possible sphere. And I was also raised by a mother who we were actively involved in Sierra Club as kids growing up. That was just normal. We lived at the base of the Sierras here in Central California, but was introduced to environmentalism as a boy. I mean, 8, 9, 10 years old, going up into the mountains, into the redwoods and so on,
Mm.
going up to Berkeley to visit my brothers. And so I would have assumed, and have assumed over the decades since then, now that's 50 or 60 years ago, that the progress that was made in the 60s around civil rights and about environmentalism, my mom was the first generation feminist around women's place in the world, all of that, I would have assumed that was going to continue to develop. It was just opening up in the 1960s. And And in many ways, it has continued to progress forward until recently. And I don't need to say much more than that, is that there's a reversal of all of that that I would never have conceived of, that we would reverse a commitment to Mother Earth, that we would reverse a commitment to the feminine, that we reverse a commitment to marginalize people of every kind, whether it be ethnicity or race or sexual orientation. Just the list is long. I even have the chills right now saying this. It's like the cold chills of dread. I could never have conceived that all these years later that we would have reversed many of that progress, and and when I say we, I'm talking about the United States, and then to see how that's affected our relationships with other countries around the world, and that in many other countries in the world, they're doing their own version of it. I don't in any way blame anybody else for what's going on in the United States, but to see it going on a global level is so disconcerting to me. Makes me sick to my stomach. I could never have conceived that this would be possible. And it's not only possible, it's actual. It's actually happening. I mean, I know you know,
Yeah.
but it's so
I
disturbing to
think
me.
this is what I'm talking, and these guys in this book, we are talking about now. They bring it up in a different way, but this is the quality of Anthropocene. This is the
Yes,
definitive, and I think United States is one of the, how you say, spear tips,
yes, yeah.
of Anthropocene. And of course, there are some industrialized nations in Europe doing the same way, but to that's why this is what I wanted to say when I was reading the book of Shachter-Shalomi Miller. And I'm saying, like 20 years back, it has been very, very, you could have seen what is going on very well. But what they did in this book, Darcia Narvaetz and co-authors, I think that they brought it in this first chapter. They brought it in a, like, from a like an indigenous view. I
Yes.
really love this because it's so honest, and it's
Yeah.
so, it brings it to the point. It's saying, from an indigenous point of view, it's saying, what the hell are you doing with this world? How can you do this? And we don't understand, because we have been living like tens of thousands or even hundreds of thousands of years with close to nature. And now in even like 200 to 300 years, this seems to be gone,
Yeah.
or is in danger. So this is really something really dramatic I can see. And this is something that yeah, this keeps me going.
Yes, 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 yeah, yeah. Yeah, there's a lot of motivation. This isn't just theory that we're talking about. It's affecting lives right now. The front page of the paper this morning. I live in Southern California. The front page is what's going on in Los Angeles with riots right now, where you have people on the cover, people of color, women that are protesting peacefully, and we've sent the National Guard in to keep them at bay. And so they're using everything from tear gas to rubber bullets. It's just unbelievable to me. And the issue is for due process for people that are being deported to countries that they never even came from. I know you know all of this, but it's like a post-apocalyptic nightmare that we're living right now. And as one article in the New York Times said today, this is just the beginning of what the current administration wants to do in terms of creating a martial law response to anything that they don't like, basically. And it's
Yeah.
really, really, really disturbing to me. That's only a few miles from where I live. This is going on right now.
Yeah, yeah, I know. What I started to do is, because it's really affecting my health, I decided to just once a week read the news, once a week. And the rest, I just keep it out.
I think that's really good. I think
I
that's
think
really good. That's wisdom
this
right there. Yeah.
increased very, very good effects on my health.
I'm glad to hear that. It's wonderful.
I mean, not to
Yeah.
to get compromised with all this rubbish all the day. And I mean, because Anthropocene is going on in so many countries in the Western world, but also some countries they somehow imitate this, in other world regions uh, to get on that spot we are now. So it's yeah. Anyway, it's I think what I wanted to say is what we can see now is what I brought up in my last book is saying what we experience now is the absence of wisdom. What we can experience is quite a big period of time that changed so many in worldview and science, and that's what they bring up. Interestingly, there are some original Western scientists work that they are quite. This is quite close to what they call the indigenous science.
Okay,
I've never
interesting.
heard this before
No, I haven't either.
but they say they're because they study them these cultures now from their origin, having pulled away let's say most of the colonialist stuff that have been dumped on it, and then bring it together with modern psychology, modern sociology, and all this what they bring in there, anthropology. This gives a completely new picture, and it is extremely refreshing. On the other hand, I believe there's quite a lot of people around the world. They really dislike what's going on, and they understand that they have to get into these different views, to study and to get these understanding into their bones to come back and to save the world,
Yeah,
somehow.
yeah. Yeah, I'm really heartened by all that you're saying. Is that I've never heard this term before. In fact, it's so funny because of the bias in Western science towards objectifying and holding at a distance. The idea of indigenous science is very attractive to me. I really like that, and I've not heard that term until right now. I'll be reading it as I read forward
Yeah.
in the book, but that gives me some hope, Tomas. It gives me some hope.
Yeah, I think this is the interesting thing. If you have let's say as elders as we are, in like elders in training, let's say. That's what I bring up in this book too. We are
I
not
like that.
we are not elders, we are elders in training until we die, This is
Beautiful,
what Zalman Shachter-Shalomi is saying.
beautiful.
If others tell us we are elders, then it's fine. If we starting to tell ourselves to be elders, it's wrong.
Mhm.
Because when you
That's
read all these indigenous materials, they say as soon as you're not living this, people won't accept you anymore as an elder. And there is one chapter in the new book about, or maybe, yeah, I brought it into the last book also about the Navajo nation, like Hojo. This is a culture called walking in beauty. It's such a different way to see. That's why I'm really fascinated, because it's incredibly rich, incredibly deep, and incredibly spiritual. I would compare it with like Ayurveda. It's a complete worldview. You can see I'm really I got really inflamed
Oh,
by
it's
these
great.
these cultures, and I think they have to tell us, and they have to nurture us. They can nurture us, and we can bring some scientific stuff with us to support, to bring up this. And then I think there will be quite a different thing going on, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. I love your being, how'd you say, inflamed? I love
Yeah.
your enthusiasm. I think it provides encouragement not only to you and me here together, but also to anybody that listens to or views these talks, is that there is hope. There is a sense of kind of guarded optimism. We can't give up, but we've got a lot of work to do.
Talking about elderhood and or spiritual elderhood, it's really a big issue, you know.
Yeah.
It's a huge issue, you know. And
Yeah.
what we need to do now is somehow to start the ones they understood what they are talking about. There might be only some individuals like us, and now we our work is to study and I say to incorporate this. You know, it's not
Yeah.
only it should not be only mental. It must be. That's what I experience now at the moment. I'm going to a period of time that I say my body house is doing some weird things to me, you know. But what I can see out of an elderhood perspective is this can be used as deepening my work or my path into my spiritual levels and into my deep, I would say, inner work levels,
Mhm.
because they are not so strongly connected with the outer levels. That's what we were talking about last time. These are the three levels I'm working
Yeah.
with this book. I think it's so important to, if we do elderhood work, it's that we have to somehow understand the further we get into elderhood work, the more difficult, the questions and how I say, the experiments we have to do, that we are asked to do. Of course, this is right. Finally, we will reach on a place. This is my intuitive vision where
Yes.
everything is getting really simple. And this is wisdom, of course.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll finish with this little postscript of what you just said. I might have mentioned this in one of our recent conversations. I can't remember, but uh, this year particularly, it's very curious to me, Tomas, is that I think you have a sense that I read typically pretty prolifically. I read a lot. I usually have several books going at one
Yeah,
time.
yeah,
And I've just done this for decades. I love learning new things, but something's changed for me. And you just reminded me of it right now. I've been curious about it. So here we are in June of 2025.
yeah.
And for the first time in memory, except for the book that you and I are reading right now, I'm not reading any new books. And what I am doing is in the mornings, I get up and spend a couple of hours in quiet time, and I'm reading old texts of Chinese texts, Persian texts that inspire thought. And then I'm writing, and I'm not even writing in prose, I'm writing poetry in response to those. So from the outside, this looks pretty weird. Certainly does not look very scientific or scholarly. And the truth is, I don't really care so much about how I look, especially about looking scholarly or scientific. There's something that's turning inside. I've remarked on this about this with a few friends, is that I'm interested. I loved your word right now. I'm interested in incorporating all that has been given me rather than trying to add something new, add anything new. And this may end tomorrow. I don't know, but we're halfway through this year. And I am intentionally not reading new material except for the book that we're reading right now. And itself, the book we're reading points towards the indigenous traditions, which is that's all I'm doing. So it's a very curious time. I wonder if you have thoughts about that.
Yes, I would like to say spontaneously, I think there are some interesting books, but the deeper we come and the broader our view is, the more difficult it gets to read a whole book because it's too narrow. That's why I usually read some texts that are published into the internet, or I read some like ebooks and pick out some important passages from there. And I hardly don't read any books in full length because I feel from aging to saging or elderhood, what we understand, I think, in our gut, hopefully not only in our brains, or even in our hearts more, because this is a big issue in loss and in this book too, because I think our heart is our infinite center. If we don't get centered in our heart, we can forget about. I pick out some things, even from my book, from Carl Jung, from Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, from Anselm Grün. I don't know if you heard about him.
No, I don't know him.
It's it's a monk, like a theologian, like Dr. Monk, that is writing, lots of books in like 30 different languages published. I try to collect all these materials. So in the first part of my new book is I say these are the sources, uh, where we have now. From there we go into the real work then, That's what I would like to answer you to say. Yes, I don't read, full books anymore because some parts seems to me not at the point where I am with my process.
Yeah.
And
I'm looking at the books behind you, and you can see the books behind me. I'm grateful for every one of them, but it feels like that's from a bygone era now. Something new has moved in. So we have these books that we've read and that we've studied, and I'm grateful for them. But there's something new. There's something new that's wanting. I liked how you put it right now. The real work. The real work is something different. It's about digging in the ground, not about adding more information up here necessarily. I'm all for the brain, but only as the brain is connected to the body, especially the heart, like you said. It's beautiful what you just said. Yeah. Tomas, I need to get going in
yeah,
just
yeah,
a minute. I wonder if we want to
yeah,
wind down. I'll leave
yeah,
that to you if it's
yeah, yeah,
okay. Yeah, yeah.
yeah, yeah. So I mean, you have to let, like the book of Shachter-Shalomi is saying, there is a theoretical part and there is a part how to develop personally and then how to develop as a society. That's what I like to bring in this work and in these talks, because these are not theoretical. They have to be invented somehow.
Yeah.
And there are so many more issues. Yeah, we will be gladly meeting again and
Yes,
talking
yeah,
again
yeah,
and
yeah.
continuing. And
As always, I will look forward to that. I love this new book that we are reading to inspire us along the way, along with the book that you're completing right now, which will also be an accompanying voice in our next conversations. Yeah, yeah.
yeah, so thank you a lot, Bob, to be with me again in this
You,
talk and to
yeah,
have
you
this
too. You too.
exchange. And it seems to be like a bunch of flowers. It's a huge bunch of flowers, and we always can pick another flower and talk about this one, 2 3 hours, and then we have another one. So it
I like
we
that beautiful image.
we
It's
might
absolutely my
continue
experience.
like 2 or 3 more lives,
Yeah.
to
Yeah,
discuss this.
exactly. Absolutely. Absolutely. I feel exactly the same way. Thank you, Tomas. I feel really honored to join you. I'm enriched by our being together. I love the scent of the flowers.
Yeah. So then, thank you, and
All right. Yeah.
yeah, we would like to invite you to be with us again
Yes.
when
Yes.
we
Yeah.
when the next part comes, and wish you all the best.
Yes, blessings to you all. Okay. Okay.